Good morning, guys, and welcome to another joint book review between Gretchen and myself. This week we are going to be talking about The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan, which has been doing the booktube circuit, probably because Jen Campbell talks about it, and Jen Campbell gets everybody to read all of the things. I'm jealous. In any case, if you haven't heard of this story, it is sort of a dystopian story. At least it's post-apocalyptic, on a future Earth where everything is flooded, and there are a handful of islands, and then everyone else lives on boats. People on the islands are called landlockers, the people on the boats are called damplings. This is sort of mainly the story of two characters. One, a young dampling girl who's part of a circus who trains a bear, and two, a landlocker girl who has become a gracekeeper, which is where the title comes from. It talks about their story and goes on from there, so we're going to be talking about this today.
So the first thing that we're going to do is give our overall impressions of the book, and this is why we do joint reviews, because Michaela and I are going to have very different opinions. Basically, my rate of this book was 3 stars on Goodreads, and quite frankly, I feel that's a generous 3 stars, because while it was very, 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 very pretty, it really didn't do anything else for me. And I felt, honestly, like a little bit, I don't want to use the word betrayed, but just very confused after what I expected the book to be and then what it became. So that's where I'm coming from.
To be fair, Gretchen reads YA for the most part, whereas I enjoy literary fiction, and this is definitely a literary fiction piece, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't 5 stars. It's not the best book I've ever read, but I did enjoy it more than I would like a normal 3-star book, which is something that I was like, it's okay. It's a book. It's definitely more focused on the writing style than it is on like a plot movement, but yeah, so if you prefer beautiful language and interesting things being done with themes, then this is probably more a book for you, whereas if you are someone who needs a fast-moving plot or really enticing characters, you might not want to pick this one up.
While I do enjoy a good literary fiction, what I ask of literary fiction is that it makes me feel something inside. Doesn't always have to have a plot, but I at least need characters. And for me, this book is told in a rotating set of POVs. So the 2 mainish characters that Michaela mentioned get most of the talking time in terms of POV, but there are other random people who also get a chapter or 2 that they tell their POV of. If that convention doesn't have a point, then I get very sad, because I really, really did love the character of North, who is the girl in the circus with a bear, and Callanish, the Gracekeeper. I thought that they had very interesting stories to tell, but they kept being interrupted by these other people I didn't like, and it just made me sad, because I kept getting drawn out from these characters that I wanted to see for a plot that just kind of did like this, and then kind of dissipated into a mush in the end. So yeah, I loved the 2 characters that we were given, but then they kind of flew away, and I was sad.
I agree a little bit with Gretchen. I didn't mind some of the other POVs, but there were definitely some that I was a bit uncomfortable with and I felt were a bit heavy-handed. I'm not going to talk in specifics because most of the ones that I took issue with were later in the book and they sort of spoil some of the plot stuff in the middle. But yes, some of those POVs I think were a little bit unnecessary and were there mainly to just say something about sex, honestly. Something about sex, which we will talk about in a little bit when we talk about the themes of this book. But yeah, I don't think that they furthered the plot in any way, and we definitely didn't care about them really, so it was kind of weird to be seeing them, or seeing through their eyes, rather. But yeah, so I agree with her. I do, however, think that some of those did further some of the themes that she picks up, as I said. Talk about sex. There we go. Moving on.
The main themes that we were kind of discussing about in the book was a theme of sex, like she just said, because trust me, I did not expect this book to make me feel as uncomfortable about sex as it did. And I'm a 21-year-old woman. I know how babies come. But this book has some really odd relationships with sex and questionable consent and just odd moments where you're just like, and it also leads into, I was not expecting this discussion of sex to meet up with a theme of mermaids that did come in as a way to discuss evolution and family and what it means to be rooted somewhere or moving, you know, in evolution, but also just in your life. So I did enjoy the discussion that came out of that. I thought that it was interesting, but it came from such an odd angle that I was just like literally reading on my Kindle going,
So I wanted to talk about all of the sort of different types of sex that show up in this book. We have sex to gain power, sex as a form of currency, questionable consent, half-dreamed, maybe rape sex, sex with infatuation, sex as just friends with benefits, and like sort of a more traditional loving sex relationship. But for the most part, all of the sexual things that are going on have nothing to do with procreation. People are not thinking about having kids, with the exception of the sex for power character, because she wants to be pregnant, and there's things that involve sex that go around that, and that one had to do with procreation, but it was less about the procreation and more about what she gained by having that child. And then the reason that like Gretchen said, this ties into evolution is that there are these two warring factors, and then this sort of intermediate thing, which is the weird mythical mermaids that sort of exist, we guess, but we never actually get to see. They're spoken about sort of in the past tense. They represent sort of a combination between the landlockers and the damplings. The damplings, which want the freedom to move, and the landlockers who want the freedom of stability. If you were a mermaid, you can move throughout the ocean and go wherever you want, but you also have stability because you aren't constantly lacking food or a safe place to live or whatever else is going on. So this idea of moving forward and evolving humanity, instead of staying stagnant in this way of thinking, is one of the themes that comes up a lot, and I think that it actually was an interesting way to go about it. I'm not sure how I feel about the critique of sex as a form of pleasure, because it does sort of end up having that tone, is that sex as a form of pleasure is wasting time, and that sex for procreation would be more beneficial because you are changing and evolving and making new.
So overall, I think at the end of the book, while I did think that it was saying some interesting things and definitely had a world that I loved and beautiful language, I felt that the characters were kind of less than I wanted because we spent so much time doing like this funky thing with the POVs. And in the end, I feel like the ending was a tiny bit more cliche than I wanted it to be. And so I kind of read that last chapter and I was like, oh, so not what I really want out of books like this, where I want to be left at the end and go, oh, it was, oh. So yeah, 3 stars from me, maybe less given on the day. Michaela makes me like it more usually, but I'm going to stay at my 3 stars.
Like I said at the beginning, I like this a little more than Gretchen, and I'm glad to know that I can sort of persuade her to enjoy things more, and I think that that's a wonderful thing for discussion, and why I think that buddy reads and things like that are such a great thing to have, because when you talk about books, you notice things more, and you hear different people's perspectives, and it sort of allows you to see things that you might not have noticed, either because you have rose-tinted glasses on and are loving the whole thing, or because you got grumpy about one thing, and there's other things that sort of help smooth that out a little bit. So yeah, I definitely liked it. If you're a literary fiction person who enjoys focusing on themes, again, this was definitely something for you. It's not very plot focused, and the characters are a bit but yeah, that's how it is. So I hope you enjoyed our discussion.
Thanks for hanging out with us as we discuss this book, and if you have read it, because like Michaela said, it is making the rounds in BookTube right now, please, down in the comments, tell us what you thought. Tell us who you agree with more. Tell us we're both wrong. Either way, we would love to hear what you think, and we hope that you enjoyed watching. Thanks, guys. Bye!